2019 was a pretty decent year for gaming. The Switch is growing in terms of sales, having outsold the Nintendo 64's lifetime, and is on track to overtake the Xbox One in a few years. Speaking of Xbox, Microsoft announced the next generation of hardware and even gave it a 2020 launch, which lines up with Sony and the PS5, the latter of whom has been dropping details throughout the year. Detective Pikachu entered cinemas back in May and sold incredibly well, having the most successful opening night of any video game tie-in movie and also becoming the most critically acclaimed. But none of these are the actual lifeblood of the industry. That instead goes to the software itself, the video games. And while the video game industry at large already has a massive award show for all the games of the year, we wanted to do something ourselves that's a bit more personal and smaller scale. So rather than going all out, we decided to discuss, debate and nominate internally in the Source Gaming team. We had a number of categories celebrating mostly the software and riddled down to our favourite games of 2019, which we have dubbed the Source Games of the Year. It's a pretty clever title if I do say so myself. But before we jump in, I just want to let you all know that unlike the Game Awards, we are keeping our games exclusively to 2019 titles. This means no Super Smash Bros. Ultimate or Gris. We've only looked at the games that released from January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. With that, let's just get one of the big categories out of the way first. There's no pretending that we are predominantly a Nintendo channel, so it makes sense that our favourite of the big three should get its own category, and the Big N has had quite a good year with a number of high-profile releases. Just recently, Pokemon Sword and Shield burst onto the scene, bringing the first true Pokemon adventure into HD, and has been doing incredibly well despite a generally mixed reception. Also doing surprisingly well is Ring Fit Adventure, the spiritual successor to Wii Fit that launched back in October and has sold out across Japan and parts of the West. Not all of Nintendo's titles were major releases either. Early in the year, Tetris 99 gave the Nintendo Switch Online some worth by offering a unique take on the Battle Royale genre, while Cadence of Hyrule surprised everyone, being the first major crossover Nintendo has had with an indie game and offering a rhythm game take on a Zelda adventure. Speaking of Zelda, Nintendo has been making good on its promise to make the series annual, with another main Zelda title in the Link's Awakening remake this September. The Game Boy Classic was one of the more unusual Zelda titles out there, and to see it remade in all its glory made a number of us very happy. Mario also got its annual title with Super Mario Maker 2, the long-awaited sequel to the Wii U success. While this one didn't make nearly as much of a splash as the original, it was still a ton of fun, with a pretty good story mode to keep players invested, and Nintendo are still updating it to this day, so who knows how it will go on. But for those more action-heavy fans, Daemon X Machina and Astral Chain both saw their debut, and offered exciting combat in and out of the mechs respectively. But despite all the intense action, they couldn't beat out Fire Emblem Three Houses for us, the next major title in the Fire Emblem series, and one of the first Switch games Nintendo announced. This long-awaited game did not disappoint, with 4 different campaigns, a ton of options for unit building, and a host of characters who are quickly becoming fan favourites. Despite coming out just after the middle half of the year, fans are still talking about this title, and it would have been our Nintendo Game of the Year if not for a certain green stash. Next Level Games decided to resurface after hiding away in the wake of Metroid Prime Federation Force to deliver us Luigi's Mansion 3 on Halloween, the latest in the Luigi's Mansion series and our Nintendo Game of the Year. Luigi's Mansion 3 is a masterful title in every facet. It plays like a dream, has a solid single-player, co-op and multiplayer experience. The presentation is incredible, having Pixar levels of charm and possibly even animation in some scenes. Almost all of the boss fights are great, and we always felt like we had a smile on our face as we played. Just check out our live stream of the Scare Scraper mode to see it for yourself. Well done, Luigi. Truly 2019 was your real year. Nintendo only makes up a fraction of the industry. A big fraction, but still just a fraction. So we need to give the other companies some notice as well in our AAA category. No indie games here, just the big budget titles created or published by some of the biggest names in the industry. This year started out strong with a long-awaited end to the Xehanort saga in Kingdom Hearts 3 on both PS4 and Xbox One. Sora, Donald and Goofy were finally back together and venturing through Disney worlds both new and old, while their friends worked behind the scenes to set up a conflict with the new Organisation 13. While some aspects of the plot could have been handled better, the presentation and gameplay were the best the series had to offer, and it managed to tie up most of the loose ends while leaving some dangling for the series' future. Around that time, EA threw its hat into the Battle Royale ring with Apex Legends, a release that surprised even EA with its success and continues to maintain a player base well into the year. EA in general had a fairly good year, particularly with their efforts to get back into the good graces of Star Wars fans by releasing Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, a new single-player Souls-like Star Wars game for the fans that many have found to be a triumphant return for Star Wars video games. Shooters also had a pretty good year, with the newest take of Call of Duty being a reboot of the original Modern Warfare, and it actually being a really good game, and one of the best titles in recent years. Not simply a HD port like the one from years before, this time the story was remade and reimagined while the gameplay was fine-tuned to be a loving return to form. Then we got new entries into both the Borderlands and Wolfenstein series. Borderlands 3 may not have made as big a splash as its predecessors, but it still did a fine job and brought the Borderlands experience back. The same can be said for Wolfenstein Youngblood, which had a fantastic showing on the Switch, a must-have for FPS fans looking for a portable gunning experience. Sony themselves had a number of impressive titles this year, with Death Stranding obviously being the most talked about. But for us, Blood and Truth was the most interesting, showing that first-person shooters can work really well in VR, long before Half-Life Alyx was announced. It really gave the PSVR some more worth, and it's a must-have for VR enthusiasts. Moving away from the more realistic looking games, NAS America released The Liar Princess and The Blind Prince to us Westerners, and gave us another quirky platformer with charming visuals, while Activision had another go at a Crash Bandicoot remake, this time remaking one of the few serious competitors to Mario Kart in the form of Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, which continues to receive monthly updates as part of the Grand Prix mode. Yet, despite all the companies competing for the best of year, only one consistently released high-quality AAA titles back-to-back, and that was Capcom. The company behind Mega Man and Street Fighter decided to lean towards horrors this year, with new entry in 3 of their biggest monster-toting series, Monster Hunter World Iceborne, Devil May Cry 5, and Resident Evil 2, the remake. Monster Hunter World Iceborne was really more of an expansion to the 2018 hit. You even needed the original Monster Hunter World to play it, but it showed us that the game could still very much offer new experiences with that same Monster Hunter feel. Meanwhile, Resident Evil 2 managed to give an interesting new take on the 1998 classic, by laying on thick on its horror elements and atmosphere. It overhauled the gameplay to be more in line with the 4th entry, and updated some aspects that were sorely lacking. While spooks are all nice and good, sometimes it just feels nicer to let loose and slash, shoot, rocket punch and recite poetry to your enemies. And this is why Devil May Cry 5 was our AAA game of the year. DMC5 was a momentous return to the series after over a decade-long hiatus since the last main numbered entry. Now Itsuno and his team are back to continue the story of the Sons of Sparta, while keeping things fresh and interesting by introducing some new twists to the formula, with its 3 protagonists darting in and out of levels together. With the most satisfying and well-constructed battle system in gaming at the moment, Devil May Cry 5 is an absolute joy to play from start to end. After 2 generations of action games watered down with quick-time events, unskippable scripted sections of walkie-talkie nothingness, Devil May Cry 5 is here to show everyone how it's done, crafting a polished and exciting experience on par with Devil May Cry 3. 5 is a fantastic return for the series, and hopefully marks the return of this legendary franchise. If you want to hear us gush more about it, then I would check out our in-depth review, both for the game and its story. Links of course will be in the description. Now, let's turn our attention away from all the giants of the industry to focus on those smaller independent teams that give it their all in the games they make. The indie market is booming, and there were some fantastic original titles this year, from Dead Toast Entertainment's stylishly bizarre shoot-'em-up platformer My Friend Pedro to the award-winning narrative-driven detective RPG Disco Elysium by Za. Fans of Eurojank games had a great 2019 with a number of titles being ported to the Switch and a few great new releases like Frogware's Sinking City, another H.P. Lovecraft inspired survival horror, but with an incredibly memorable plot and characters to balance out the usual gameplay problems found in this genre. Speaking of, fans of the awkward cult classic Pathologic were treated to the long-awaited sequel Pathologic 2 by Icepick Lodge, a title that is more approachable than the first while still managing to keep that awkward but strangely mesmerising gameplay feel. We got two great first-person shooters in the indie scene this year, starting with a classic boomer shooter inspired title in Voidpoint's Eon Fury, a prequel to the 2016's Bombshell, and then in October we got the long-awaited Outer Worlds, that looked to recapture the fun and enjoyment of Obsidian Entertainment's take on the Fallout universe, Fallout New Vegas. As is pretty common in this scene, we got a number of new homage games that aim to capture the feel of titles fans love that seem to have lost their way over the years, such as Advance Wars inspired Wargroove by Chucklefish Games, that fans have been long awaiting since its 2017 reveal. And continuing to pick up Intelligent Systems slack, Moonsprout Games released their take on the classic Paper Mario RPG style with Bug Fables. Some of the bigger indie kids got sequels this year, with Grasshopper Manufacturer's return to the No More Heroes universe in Travis Strikes Again, seeing a more arcadey take on the series' hack-and-slash action combat with a dab of co-op play, while delving deep into a meta-narrative penned by Suda51, who returned to the director's chair for this game. Shovel Knight finally saw the launch of King of Cards right at the end of the year, wrapping up all the promised Kickstarter DLC and finally allowing Yacht Club Games to move on to something new. Meanwhile, Playtonic Games proved that they do have what it takes, with the follow-up to the controversial Yooka-Laylee in a Donkey Kong Country-inspired platformer, Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair. In fact, there were so many high-quality indie titles this year that it was an incredibly close call for the number one spot. It seems the indie world was captivated by fluffy white animals in unique-looking puzzle-based titles, as Barbar Is You and Untitled Goose Game ended going at it neck to neck. The former was a unique game with a high-level concept that offered genuine challenge and incredibly satisfying eureka moments that pushed players to their mental limit. It was a game that made you think hard, even after its developer Hempuli expertly eased the player into understanding the game's mechanics. However, sometimes you don't want to think hard, and just revel in the pure chaos, which is why House's Untitled Goose Game grabbed the golden bell handed out to the number one spot and proceeded to steal our hearts while it was at it. The game was anticipated since its reveal, and the antics of the villainous goose terrorising a quaint British village has left such a strong impression in the minds of gamers that it even got a special cameo at Jeff Keighley's Game Awards this year, although it's actually winning an award in ours. With so many games coming out every year, it's very easy for players to just miss a few knockout titles, and when these end up being on previous hardware no longer printed in their original run, it sometimes becomes impossible to pick them up. Thankfully, we've seen an influx of ports and remasters over the years, giving some of these titles a new breath of life, or simply bringing a previous exclusive to a new piece of hardware for new audiences. The Nintendo Switch is no stranger to ports, and Nintendo has been rinsing the Wii U dry, finally bringing New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe to the system and giving new fans the chance to play one of the better New Super Mario Bros. Games. Capcom went all out with the ports this year, re-releasing the Ace Attorney trilogy and building up more fans of Phoenix Wright before the inevitable 7th title. It brought a slew of HD Resident Evil games to Nintendo fans, and finally, released its action blockbuster series Devil May Cry on the Switch, including the magnum opus that is Devil May Cry 2. I am definitely not being facetious when I say that. For fans of story-driven titles, P-Cube released Our World Is Ended, giving a visually impressive glimpse into the daily life of a game developer and the emotional journey he spends between the real and virtual worlds. Then VA11 Hall A, or Valhalla as most know it, put players behind the bar and gave them the experience of an unrelated party looking into the daily troubles of her customers in a rough cyberpunk world. Toby Fox decided to spread the love by offering the first chapter of Deltarune onto consoles, while the Nintendo 64 Turok games made a surprising comeback on the Nintendo Switch. Sniper Elite 3 Ultimate Edition showed us how a port should be done by offering an experience on par with its contemporaries, all while including all of the DLC and sold at a budgeted price, while the cult classic sweary game Deadly Premonitions Origins made a shocking return as a Switch exclusive, giving new players the chance to experience a truly bizarre but captivating title from one of the industry's most undersung authors. What fans really wanted to see on the Switch though was the big AAA experiences found on Sony and Microsoft platforms, and we got just that, with Spyro Reignited Trilogy bringing the Sony icon to the big N once more in a masterfully done remaster, and then the big one, Witcher 3. A game people said would and could not happen on Nintendo's portable systems, defying the odds and making a very cleanish transfer over. However, unlike the indie category, there was one game that absolutely destroyed the competition here, being the most voted for game in this entire video. The first Switch game ever announced, Dragon Quest XI's Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition, is possibly the winner for the longest game title this year and is currently our pick for Port of the Year. With new orchestrated tracks, additional side quests that harken back across to the whole Dragon Quest series, the option to jump between two different styles of gameplay, and just improved gameplay all around, the title of Definitive Edition does not lie. This is possibly the best Dragon Quest game in the series, and gives a bright shine on the franchise's future, especially here in the West. Now, let's just step back and take a look at all the games of 2019. Video games are a visual medium, so it's important that games look just as good as they play. Good visuals can supplement good gameplay and elevate a title. Often, the more unique the graphical style, the better. On the indie front, Untitled Goose Game goes for a charming, simplistic aesthetic that lends itself well to the wanton mayhem of the game. Both Katana Zero and Cadence of Hyrule are retro throwbacks with beautiful pixel art, and The Outer Worlds offers ethereal skies above its post-apocalyptic land, with AAA quality graphics. On the AAA front, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice boasts a beautiful feudal Japanese locale and chilling monster designs. Meanwhile, Death Stranding delivers digitised Hollywood actors, perfect down to every pore and tattoo, and several other celebrity cameos just as perfectly recreated against a desolate wasteland version of America. Such an approach isn't always necessary, of course. Simply digitally recreating actors can take away from the uniqueness of a character, so Capcom, in making its new Resident Evil 2 and Devil May Cry, took to using the likeness of models in order to attain a base of realism, while sprucing them up and altering them so they could still resemble the iconic video game characters you know and love. While Resident Evil 2 shoots for straight realism in every aspect of its presentation, Devil May Cry 5 juxtaposes the photorealism of its characters alongside an exaggerated world, creating hyperrealism, a beautiful mixture that seems believable due to the practicality of everything. Titles like Borderlands 3 and Daemon X Machina go for a stylised approach, utilising cel shading to set themselves apart from their contemporaries. Then Super Mario Maker 2 utilises a variety of different art styles to tug at our nostalgia and make us feel like we are making authentic Mario games from across multiple generations. Continuing with Nintendo, Yoshi's Crafted World debuted early in the year, and developer Goodfield delivered a similar style to its previous two games, that being styling everything in the world after real-world fabrics and objects. This time, the theme is arts and crafts, and Goodfield delivers a great take on this, while making good use of the Unreal Engine 4 to keep a steady frame rate. Luigi's Mansion 3, on the other hand, goes for a CG movie look, with gorgeously detailed textures and fluid animations. It feels like playing a Saturday morning cartoon, and has given the Mushroom Kingdom more charm than it has ever had before. The Mario movie has a lot to work towards now. However, the game that won our hearts and the Visuals of the Year award is The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. Beautifully reimagining the 1994 classic in playful diorama aesthetic, Link's Awakening breathes new life into Link's Koholint adventure through its excellent texture and modelling work. Everything down to the rocks on Tay Heights, to the grass and water, look like what an artist's depiction of what these materials would look like on an actual diorama. It's such a specific style, and it nails it perfectly. It's so well done to the point that people have made actual set pieces in real life of this game that look almost indistinguishable from the actual gameplay itself. Oftentimes it feels like peering into your own miniature Zelda adventure, and works perfectly with the tone of the game. The mark of a good game soundtrack is one that can stay in your mind, one that goes above and beyond just matching what's on screen and creates an emotional connection with the listener. 2019 had a bunch of stellar auditory gems, so let's go over our picks for the best. Team Sonic Racing and Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled came crashing in this year with a boatload of nostalgic tracks, containing remixes and revamps of old favourites, and they're all a joy to listen to. The former was handled by a team encompassing old and new, Jon Suno of Crush 40, joined by Sonic Mania composer T. Lopez, and they do a bang-up job. Being a remake, Crash Team Racing has to compete with the original game's OST, which is a funky cacophony of strange tunes, which greatly fits the world of Crash Bandicoot. The remake keeps to this spirit, but with updated instruments, and generally just gives a richer overall auditory experience. On the subject of remakes, Ryo Nagamatsu, remix mastermind of Nintendo Land and A Link Between Worlds, returns for The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on the Switch, and he hits it out of the park with his revamped OST. It keeps to the nature of the original tracks, at some points even incorporating the original chiptunes into the music, the theme that plays in the face shrine being a particular standout, and it builds up to the original track with a suspenseful and haunting orchestral arrangement that makes the song hit tenfold. There are a lot of nostalgic hits this year, with Tetris 99 providing EDM remixes of those classic repurposed Russian tunes from the original game, and the Smash Fighter Pass dropped a bunch of neat new remixes this year from 4 respective series, with a standout coming from SNK. But of course there was also a Megalovania remix, and you know that's already banging. Pokemon Sword and Shield, among its great battle themes, even contained a Toby Fox soundtrack, which just shows how much that man has moved up in the world. Bug Fables, a game in which we previously reviewed, is a love letter to the Paper Mario series in every way, including its soundtrack, which is very reminiscent of the original Nintendo 64 game and an upbeat joy to listen to. On the subject of indie games, Eon Fury matches the music stylings of the games inspired from it like Doom and Wolfenstein, with an atmospheric, futuristic vibe, utilising a mixture of rock and techno to let players revel in the grunge of its world. And then on the opposite spectrum, we have an actual rhythm game in Muse Dash, a title seemingly inspired by the hardcore rhythm arcade games of Japan and a J-pop influenced soundtrack to match. Daemon X Machina and Astral Chain both hit the Switch, offering 2 different takes on anime action game soundtracks, the former going for a large assortment of different genres from orchestral rock to techno grunge, and the latter going for a modern anime vibe, complete with a full-blown anime OP. Fire Emblem Three Houses 2 has a very anime-esque intro theme, and its soundtrack is a unique fusion of EDM and orchestral, complete with the stray dubstep track. Rounding out our action games, Wolfenstein Youngblood continues in the tradition of its forebearers with its synth-heavy beats. But the crown beauty of action game soundtracks is Devil May Cry 5, with all of its stylish adrenaline-inducing fury. The battle themes are fully dynamic and synced to the action at screen, and the way they're incorporated makes the ultimate goal of Devil May Cry, overcoming your enemies as stylishly as possible, even more satisfying. The songs reach their climax when you do. But ultimately, nostalgia beats all. Our entire channel is based around a series that is primarily fueled by Nintendo nostalgia after all, so the winner of our soundtrack of the year is Cadence of Hyrule: Crypt of the Necrodancer. If there's one thing Zelda is renowned for, it's the music, and the arrangements Cadence of Hyrule brings are no slouch. It has fantastic remixes tuned expertly for its fast-paced, pulse-pumping, rhythm-based gameplay, and even having new compositions that feel right at home in the land of Hyrule. Cadence of Hyrule marks a collaboration between Brace Yourself Games and Nintendo's own Legend of Zelda series. The game was born out of a love for Crypt of the Necrodancer that both series creator Shigeru Miyamoto and series producer Eiji Aonuma shared. Cadence of Hyrule becomes interesting when you realise that the performances that comprise the track employ some of the biggest talent in the fan community, essentially making this a labour of love from both parties. The compositions were the work of composer Danny Baranowski, who helmed the previous game, Crypt of the Necrodancer. Prominent vocal cover artist Adriana Figueroa provides her voice for the soundtrack, with Jules Conroy on guitar, Michaela Nachtigall on violin, and the freeing Otomatone, just to name a few. The soundtrack is a wonderful treat made by the fans of the series for the fans of the series, and it's one deserving of our soundtrack of the year.
You're breathtaking! You're all breathtaking. All right. So,
as the game industry grows, it's important for us to not only look at the games themselves, but the community around them. That's why this year we also wanted to highlight an industry moment of the year, something that isn't a specific video game, but is related. This could be something positive like the reveal of Half-Life Alyx, a new official title in the Half-Life series and something many thought impossible for years. It could also be something negative like the awful Google Stadia launch, and really just about anything that Google did to try and promote that console, as the negative news just kept slowly trickling out. It's highly deserving of this year's Raspberry if we had an award like that. On a technological level, this was the year that ray tracing started to actually become good in games, and an influx of new accessibility options were added to broaden the medium. Super Smash Bros. Had a big year with Masahiro Sakurai deciding to become a Let's Player for the series and change up the video format for character demonstrations, creating something that felt more personal and appealed to many of us. Then Super Smash Bros. Ultimate the North American Open 2019 was a blast for the competitive side and great fun to attend, as Nintendo stepped up to the plate to support its own growing esport community. Some games even managed to create a long-standing impression through the memes that derived from it. At least one member of the team found surprising joy in the reveal of Devil May Cry 2 on Switch, and the GOAT Twitter community that spawned from it, although arguably bigger was the community that formed around Untitled Goose Game, which was big enough for that Game Awards cameo we mentioned earlier. And following from that, we got a few cool gaming related other forms of media this year, with the most successful video game movie launching in Detective Pikachu. Sonic the Hedgehog would have also made this year, but after listening to fan feedback to the atrocious first design, the team buckled down and greatly improved it, reportedly without the crunch time. We will just have to see if the film is any good now. We even had a nomination for books, with a book around ex-Nintendo president Iwata-san being released in Japan, and an official English translation on the way. A great way to remember an inspirational man. Ultimately though, we are the Nintendo fanboys, so Nintendo's Directs are always going to be the highlights of the year for us. The September Direct was a really good showing. It had core Nintendo titles like Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion and Pokemon getting new updates, while both Xenoblade and Fire Emblem received long-awaited remasters. Third parties, both big and small, had it good, with Overwatch being officially unveiled, Trials of Mana and Witcher 3 getting release dates, Deadly Premonition 2 revealed, and Return of the Obra Dinn being ported. And then of course Terry Bogard was revealed for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and the Direct was followed by another stream of Banjo-Kazooie with an instant release. It was a fantastic presentation for fans, but ultimately, it just wasn't as good as Nintendo's E3 showing. Nintendo had similar games in their E3 Direct to the September one, including new information on Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion and Pokemon, but it was everything else that was much stronger. Third parties had a good time with the previously mentioned Witcher 3 and Trials of Mana remake being announced here, but there was also a new Contra game, a remake of Panzer Dragoon, a new John Romero game called Empire of Sin, and of course the long-teased No More Heroes 3, a proper sequel to the Wii classics, exclusive for Switch. As Smash Bros. Fans, we were treated well, with a confirmation of the hero from Dragon Quest, and then finally, after so many requests, Banjo and Kazooie. It was just overall the more exciting presentation, and ended on an incredibly high note, with the announcement of a sequel to 2017's Game of the Year, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now that's how you end a show. Finally, we wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our patrons, who we opened the floor up to for picking an award. There were no limitations on what they could vote for, meaning Nintendo, indie and AAA games were all up against each other, and this allowed for some different games to get some focus. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order seems like the Star Wars game fans have been clamouring for from EA for years now, and has come out controversy-free, which is impressive for the company in this era. Shakedown Hawaii is another such game, being the successor to the very popular Retro City Rampage. A classic GTA-inspired parody game, it boasted better presentation and a 16-bit open world, complete with destructible environments and a plethora of weapons to really go nuts with. Untitled Goose Game gets another shout out here as well as The Other Worlds, two more indie titles to get highlighted. Most of the rest of this list is Nintendo, however, with Pokemon Sword and Shield and Tetris 99 getting some fine votes, although the Mario series shows its dominance, with both Luigi's Mansion 3 and Super Mario Maker 2 getting a lot of well-deserved love. Kingdom Hearts 3 and Devil May Cry 5 are the last bastions of non-Nintendo focus in this category, and both did really well in the votes. They were both highly anticipated returns to the series, with the former closing the door on a saga, while the latter potentially opens up a new arc. Yet, neither was as popular as Intelligent Systems' latest outing, Fire Emblem Three Houses. It deserves to be one of the games of 2019, and shows that the Fire Emblem series is still going strong, even after its little blips with Fates and the fear in the fanbase over its series trajectory. Fire Emblem continues to prove its position as one of Nintendo's premier franchises, and with new story DLC coming in 2020, the title's going to remain talked about for some time. And that does it for our Source Game of the Year Awards 2019. I hope you enjoyed, and I'm interested to hear about what your opinions were. What were your favourite games for each of these categories? We didn't just want to highlight one game for each category this time, because there are so many fantastic games, and even if they're not the super mainstream ones or not everyone has played them, some really do deserve more attention, and so we thought it important to really put a focus on not just the winner, but all of the runners-up as well. I want to give a special thanks to all of our lovely patrons on screen. Thank you very much for voting, and if you guys would like to take part next year, or take part in any other videos we have coming up, then you can always subscribe to our Patreon with a link down below. Sign up and join the Discord and chat away with us as we go over some of our upcoming projects. Remember to hit a like and subscribe button for this video, and always remember to return to the source.